How are you doing? I'm Martin from Gardens for Life and Birdland Homestead. So we are live on a couple of YouTube channels on our Birdland Cottage, Birdland Homestead YouTube channel and our Gardens for Life YouTube channel as well. And we are going to be on Odyssey and Rumble next time. And we're just going to hang in there now for people to join. Let's see if we get any questions. So for those of you watching this afterwards, you can watch the rest of all of the questions and answer sessions that we've had so far. And this is number 7, I believe. Yes, it is. So it's the last six questions and answer sessions. You can watch those on our website or on our YouTube channel as well. So they're available there. I'm going to make audio versions available to the Patreon channel as well, or to the Patreon page, I should say. So now let me just check here. So you can ask any questions about homesteading or gardening or growing your own food or preserving food, or even a little bit about backup power and lights or heating systems. So we have been experimenting or actually just using a number of different ones over the last couple of decades. So let's see, we'll just hang in there for people to join. So I have a question here about willows. Can you plant willows near the septic tank? Of course, that makes sense to actually get the willows to eat up all of that goodness, the runoff, basically. But I wouldn't plant them too near any kind of concrete structure in case they might damage the structure over time. It could happen. It's probably not as bad as you might think, but as long as you keep a fair distance, you'll be fine. They don't send runners, so you should be okay. Willow in general is quite easy to manage. You can actually coppice it or even pollard it, where you actually just basically cut it back at that height, or coppicing it at the very bottom. So you can just get new cuttings and wood, stick wood from it every year. You can use those either as kindling, or you can just use those in the garden as well as beanstalks, for example. But be careful. You better dry them out first, because otherwise they will take root and they will grow where you might not want them to grow, in the middle of your vegetable patch, because willows are really hard not to get to root. So what I like to do, actually, I must make a video about this. So we actually take our willow cuttings, the offcuts anyway, all the ones that we're not going to use for cuttings, we throw those to the rabbits, and the rabbits peel all the bark off them and they eat it. They love it. They also love the leaves as well during the growing season, so you can throw them an entire branch and they'll eat it. But you can just throw them the wood with the bark on. They'll eat the bark off it, and that'll help it to dry out quicker, but also it won't grow, of course, without the bark and the cambium layer around the bark. That's the green layer under the outer bark, which is actually the main part of the tree that's alive. And that's the part with all of the stem cells and rooting hormones in it. And so it won't actually root in your vegetable patch if you use it after the bark. The rabbits love doing it, and why not? Why not let them? Same as the chickens. You might as well let the chickens go scratching in the garden, as long as you make sure they don't scratch up an area that you don't want them to scratch up, like your whatever, say where you're growing lettuces. Of course, they're going to eat everything as soon as you let them into the garden. You don't want to really let chickens free range altogether. So if you have any questions about homesteading or gardening or anything to do at all with fuel or business, how to start a business, let me know. And you can just type it in on whatever platform you're watching this, on the chat or in the comments, and we should see it over here. So please put question in all caps at the start, and that way we know that the question is directed towards me, so that I'll answer it for you. And we find these questions and answer sessions nice to connect to our audience and also to get a bit of feedback, but also just to have a chat with our audience as well. And of course, it's hard to keep talking for an hour. Usually these last for about an hour. But last week we had a great session and there was lots of good questions asked as well. It was a variety of questions all about how to grow food using compost and no-dig and lasagna gardening, and a little bit about business and homesteading as well. So it was a good mix of questions. So I highly appreciate it if you give us a quick thumbs up wherever you're watching this. It'll just help us get the word out there. So let me just take a look here. So we have Bianca actually working away in the background, and she's going to be highlighting the comments. Any comments or questions that might come in on the various channels. And we are also running some banners as well. So mainly we have lots of different questions that we usually get. So one of the main questions people often ask is, how do you get rid of the slugs, or how do you manage slugs? I like to call it slug pressure. You want to try and reduce your slug pressure as much as you can by not providing habitat, but also by not providing easy food sources for them. So basically, picking up weeds or picking up leaves off your plants and then dropping them on the ground, now those will be going rotten, and that's what attracts the slugs. They can smell it from a mile away, and they can, they can actually come from a field all the way into your garden just because they're smelling a plant that's actually under stress. So they know, because they're the recyclers of the cold temperate climate, and you don't want to do that. So what we do is we mostly throw our weeds that we pull up, or the grasses, or for example any kind of extra leaves on our plants, especially perennial plants, any greens and kale, we throw those to the chickens and they take care of it. They will not take again. If you throw them into a compost pile, they might grow again, and because the root systems are still there, and it's hard to shake all the grass or all the soil off the roots of the grass, it's almost impossible, and it's not worth the effort really. As long as if you're throwing them into a compost pile, of course, you're going to end up with basically weeds growing in the compost pile. And it's hard to avoid that unless you cover it with plastic. But I don't think you're doing your soil life in the compost pile any favors by covering it. Generally speaking, when we keep compost, not compost piles, but compost that we get delivered, like mushroom compost, we do keep it in a pile for at least 3 or 4 months before it's ready to use in the garden. And we don't, generally speaking, cover it with a tarp or with plastic, just because it doesn't really matter. Like it wants to it wants to actually break down, and it does heat up quite a bit. I'd be afraid it might heat up too much if you tarp it. But also we want the worms to come up from the bottom, and we want it to rain on it. So other than the end of summer, I wouldn't bother, because at the end of the summer, usually you get, or even towards after midsummer, you're going to end up with grass seeds flying around, and they're all going to land in your compost piles, and it's bad news. Trust me. Ask me how I know. So I ended up with some weeds and grasses actually growing on top of the compost piles that I had left there for 1.5 years. And that's going to be extra work, but I figured it's not all bad news, because those plants, even though they're not plants that I want to grow, of course, like generally speaking, like creeping buttercup or even grasses, I don't want those to grow on the compost, because it's going to be more hassle to get rid of them. But at the same time, they're feeding the soil life in the pile, so it's not that bad. The only way soil life can actually thrive in your soil is if there is plants feeding it. So your plants produce sugar through photosynthesis and feed the soil life through root exudates. So now let's see. Do we have any questions? Tips on growing carrots? Sure. So the way we grow carrots is there's 2 different ways. That's the only vegetable we don't transplant. Everything else gets transplanted. Not sure about parsnips. We haven't really done them much, but carrots, we always direct sow them in a raked garden bed or space, and just sprinkle them over the garden bed evenly, not in drills. We don't do drills because why not use all of the space in the garden bed instead of just using a little bit of space in rows? You're better off spreading them thinly over the garden bed, the entire space, and then you don't have to tin them at all. You just cover them with a slight layer of compost, with a potting compost would be best, seed starting compost, and just a very thin, fine layer, like a millimeter or so, just to keep the moisture on them, but not to burden them too much, so that the seed can actually sprout and it'll actually grow. If you cover it with too much compost, the seed is not going to be able to, it's not going to have enough oomph to break through the layer of compost to get to the sunlight. So water it in, and if it's in the summer, usually we lose carrots to a drought. If you don't water them once or twice a day with just a watering can, you might lose your carrots seeds or even little carrot plants to a drought, especially if it's very hot and the sun is shining. That can happen very easily. So what I would do is keep them watered and only cover them with a millimeter of soil, about the same thickness as the seed. So that's a good rule of thumb. And you can just spread them out instead of drills. I just spread them out over the entire growing space. And that way you can just pick away as they grow. You can pick away at them and just harvest them in between others. And then you can kind of tin them out, but harvesting them at the same time. So you don't really have to tin them out at an early stage that way. And you're not wasting any seeds as well. So we do the same thing with carrots, but also in a crate. You know, the plastic crates out of a supermarket, they're about that size, about 60 by, I think it's about 60 by 80 centimeters or something like that. And they're perfect for growing carrots, especially the deep ones. They're like maybe 10 inches or 25 centimeters in depth. And we fill them up with compost and do the same thing. Sprinkle the carrot seeds all over, and then cover it with a thin layer of potting compost or seed starting compost. The reason why we use that instead of regular compost is because it's much finer, and you can just work with it easier. It's just easier to spread. You could use a sieve as well, but we don't bother. Now, folks, if you have any questions about gardening, growing food, preserving, let me know in the comments or in the chat. We also have a Patreon page now as well. If you could bring up the link for that, Bianca, that'd be lovely. We also are running some workshops. Tomorrow morning, actually, we're running our first canning workshop. Actually, no, it's the second canning workshop that we're running. And tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening, we're going to be running a chicken keeping workshop. So keeping chickens for egg production. And backyard chickens are really great because they're very little work, actually. They're probably easier to keep than growing vegetables as a skill. And you can basically convert grain that's very storable into protein without having to kill an animal or process it. So you can just get eggs instead, and they'll be much better quality than what you get in the shops. So if you'd like to take a look at, oh yes, thank you, Bianca, for the link there. So that's our Patreon page. You can put it in the chat. You don't have to put it below. So let me see here. So another question that we often get is why we do no-dig gardening. And if you haven't heard of no-dig gardening before, well, obviously you don't dig the soil. That's why it's called no-dig. But then you're actually just applying a layer of compost on the top of your soil. So your soil will be here, and you put your cardboard on top, or you smother the weeds or the unwanted existing vegetation with a tarp, for example. You remove the tarp, and then you put once the weeds have been smothered, you just put your compost layer on top. Usually we do about 4 to 6 inches, of well-rotted mushroom compost, and you can get it delivered in a large, like a big truckload or even a big tractor trailer. And it's not that expensive for mushroom compost, and you can start an area maybe about the size of a regular, like a standard size allotment in Britain, for say about maybe 10 by 10 meters, and you can do about probably about 4 or 5 inches of compost in that size of an area, and that'll grow an awful lot of food in as small a space as that. Even if you're living in the suburbs and you have a bit of a back garden, if you have any room at all, that would be an idea. If you want to look up, hello, how are we doing? If you want to look up the pizza garden, we did some videos nearly 4 years ago now. It's hard to believe it's been that long. And we have been growing berries in it now since. So it has perennialized. And the birds mostly planted berry bushes there, like raspberries and currants and a few gooseberries as well, and elderberries. So usually that's what happens to our gardens. Let me see here. Yes, indeed. So the next seed and plant swap is coming up on the 12th of May. They have become quite popular indeed. So we're going to call it Homesteaders of Ireland Swap Meet instead. And so all the people that have come before are very welcome, and anyone else as well. Any new people that, even if you don't know what a swap meet is, please do take a look at our website, and you can find out all about it. So basically all you do is you bring your surplus seeds or plants or whatever you might be producing on your homestead. Excuse me. Whatever you produce on your homestead, you can bring it, and you can just leave it on the tables or swap somebody for what they have. And you can take away whatever is available on the tables as well. So last time we brought in a whole bunch of cuttings, spare pots and trays for seeds, and a whole pile of seeds as well. So we're hoping to turn this event into like a Homesteaders of Ireland kind of a gathering, or like a kind of a festival in the near future. Like maybe we'll do one in the fall, as in like in autumn. So, but the swap meets will always remain. We're going to be hosting those as a community event, on an ongoing basis. So we've been hosting those for 3 years now, and I think we host like 4 events now, and they've all gone very well. And it's been getting more and more busy, thanks to all of you guys for coming along. And it's great because people are getting really excited about, when they bring all the seeds home, and they've been chatting to a whole bunch of other gardeners. And when they get home, they have all these seeds that they can grow, that they didn't have to go looking for elsewhere. And oftentimes you can't even get half of these seeds because people actually saved them themselves in their gardens. And they could be, sometimes they can be quite rare, like our great mullein seeds. Maybe a common plant in Europe, but it's not that easy to get seeds for. And once you have them, you can always get the seeds again year after year. So they're only a biennial plant though. So that means they grow a rosette of leaves, basically on the base of the plant. And then in the second year, they grow a flowering stalk, possibly 2 to 2.5 meters tall, or 7 or 8 feet tall. And great mullein is a really good plant. It's got a lovely yellow flower, and it flowers for months and months. And it also is very useful in the kitchen as well, for medicinal purposes, like just to make a tea or make an oil as well from the flowers. You make a tea from the leaves. So please let me know if you have any questions in the chat. We host these questions and answer sessions every Thursday. So if you have any questions, if you come up with any questions afterwards, or if you can't attend, you can simply email the question to contact@gardensforlife.ie. Hello, Colin. How are you doing? Geez, I look like I have sunburn, but I don't think I do. I didn't spend that much time outside today. It's just the lighting, just the angle. Yeah, The great mullen is biennial, and it's, by the way, the great mullen is pretty much the only plant that we grow that's not perennial. Most of the plants we start are perennial, that we start from seed or from cuttings, for that matter. Of course, there is some vegetables that are just annual as well. But in general, especially in terms of flowers, it's the kind of plant that you want to just, you start it off in a tray or in seed trays, and then you can just plant it out here and there. And usually it's quite reliable. And just remember that it takes a full year for it to produce the flowers or the flowering stalk. So it has become our favorite plant. Now, it used to be, my favorite flower used to be the marigold. Then there is also the giant daisy or yacon, but they don't flower for very long. The marigold is not too bad. It flowers for like 6 weeks. But then you have a relatively brief window to pick them, to use them in the kitchen. You can dry them. We have these dehydrators that are actually available through our website, and you can dry flowers with it in the summer. Must actually get you a link here. Hang on a second. So we have all of our book recommendations and products on this page. I just added it to the chat. And the dryer is there. So I have a question here from Colum. Just wondering if you grow peppers or chilies and which ones work best in your climate. Well, the trouble is that you have to plant those indoors, and we don't really have the space in our greenhouses to grow them at the moment. We have tried to grow tomatoes last year, but it does take a lot of watering as well, because our greenhouse is really dry because there is no doors in it yet, but also because we're growing other things like figs, like higher value crops basically. We love tomatoes and peppers, but it's just a bit of work. Like there is especially with tomatoes, you'd want to be there nearly every day just to take care of them. But if we ever get a third greenhouse, a separate greenhouse, we might start growing some of those as well. But Bianca, since you're watching this, I think we should ask Charles to, we'll pre-order some tomatoes off him, like a 20-kilo crate. The Bullone Ark in Loughrea is great. It's a market garden, and they produce a lot of fine vegetables. And they're friends of ours, and we might as well actually get some tomatoes off them. Since that we haven't got the time to, or the space at the moment, to plant them ourselves. But you know, things like peppers and tomatoes, you have to grow those indoors in our climate here. It's cold temperate, USDA zone 9A, I believe it is. So it can get frosty. You can get -5 or 6 sometimes, even -8 or 9 we had last winter. Thankfully, not the winter just gone. So it was not too bad. We got away with the winter that time, if I may say so. But the summer is definitely taking its time to come in. Luckily, we finally had a drought now for, I wouldn't even call it a drought, but in comparison to what we had to deal with. So since July, last June was the last time it didn't rain for an extended period of time. And here in the Midlands of Ireland, it hasn't stopped raining since July last year. So there wasn't a period of time, like a week or whatever, or even 5 days, where it didn't rain. It was just non-stop almost. And so as a result, we had loads of flooding around the country as well. Excuse me. And especially Loch Functional, is that how you say it? And so our paths in the gardens have been all mucky as a result of a wet winter, and it was a wet summer as well last year. So we're really happy that it finally dried out. But I'm going to make a video actually tomorrow, and I'm going to show you how all of the garden beds have cracked. Like all the compost in the garden beds and the no-dig beds it has gone so dry, it has turned from muck into something like a desert landscape, like with loads of cracks. And yeah, no, it is still moist underneath. So our garden beds, or our grow spaces, the ones that are not covered with wood chips, so not lasagna beds, but the no-dig beds, they'll do fine for 2 or 3 weeks without watering. We never water them, and usually we get away with not having to do it at all for the whole summer. In our climate, we're fortunate enough in that way that we have fairly regular rain. Unfortunately, of course, we're happy when it doesn't rain. That's how much rain we have here. But I know in a lot of other parts of the country, or in a lot of other parts of the world, I should say, they are suffering from a lot of droughts, and they haven't had rain for years. And I can't imagine what that's like. Sure, you couldn't grow a thing. No, so we also have a homestead introduction course actually coming up as well. You can find the details on our website. It's just gardensforlife/events. If you're interested in participating in one of our workshops, you can get your tickets there and more details as well. There's videos as well that you can watch as an introduction. So let me see here. There's a question. You can off that banner now, people. Sorry, what was the question? What kind of plants are suitable to start growing a hedge around the property? Well, that's a good question. I don't know where that came in from, but that's great. So what I would do is, it depends on how big your property is. If you want to grow a shelter belt to block the wind and to get some privacy from a roadside, for example, I would start with willow. I'd start with hybrid willow because it grows much faster than regular willow. Also, it does very well in very wet ground, like even waterlogged ground, it does fine in. Same as alder. So you can also use poplar as well. But again, those are deciduous trees. So in the winter time, they lose the leaves. But they grow really quickly. So you can go do a good thick layer of them. Again, it depends on how much land you have. If you have an acre or more, you can probably spare 5 meters for a hedge. But if you don't, if you only have 1 meter for a hedge, you should see our front garden videos, and you'll see that we have a 1 meter thick hedge there, but we interplanted all kinds of different things in there, like a bit of laurel in between, some wild fruit trees like crab apples. You can also do cherry plum. You can do, we like to throw in wild fruit trees, and mainly willows and poplars, but you can also do some pines, but we haven't had to do that really. I mean, I would probably, if I was starting again, I would probably throw in a few pines here and there, but I'd always go with a mixed hedge no matter what, because if one thing doesn't do too well where you are, or if the climate doesn't allow, maybe some trees will do better than others. You have a good chance that it will taken up into a good hedge, either giving you privacy or wind protection. If you can block the wind, your trees, your fruit trees, are going to grow twice as fast. That's what Toby Hemingway once said. And all of your other plants, especially the ones with big leaves, at our big garden, we have a willow shelter belt. It's mainly willow. And in the late summer, they're growing up. We cut them back every winter. In late summer, they grow quite tall and quite thick as well, and block the wind completely almost. So they're protecting our vegetables such as courgettes, anything with big leaves, the pumpkins as well. So because we're on top of a hill here, that could happen, especially if you're near the coast. I would suggest trying to block the wind for sure. Any specific types of crops or plants that thrive particularly well in a no-dig garden? So that's a good question, because a no-dig garden is a bacteria-based soil. So it's high in nitrogen and it's low in carbon. So it sounds fierce scientific, but all it means is if you cover your garden with compost, like a no-dig garden, you just smother the existing vegetation and you'd cover it with compost, a good thick layer. Whatever kind of compost you can get, but here in Ireland we're blessed with mushroom compost. It's readily available, so we covered with that, and then you can grow most of your all of your vegetables you can grow, all of the annuals, all of the green, leafy greens. The thing that you can grow berry bushes in there, no problem at all. They'll do very well. But as soon as you cover your garden with an extra layer, like a 4-inch or 5-inch layer, like 10 or 12 centimeters of wood chips, now you don't mix them in, you just cover it, and you don't mix the two layers, the compost layer and the wood chip layer. You would you can then block all the weed seeds from that come in with the wind, and you'll have even less weeding to do, a lot less weeding. And then that's my garden. So that's called lasagna gardening or forest gardening. If you introduce fruit trees, for example, and berry bushes and that kind of thing, if you try to cover the 6 layers of the 7-layer forest system. So the 7 layers of the forest is usually canopy trees, understory trees, and then bushes, vines, ground cover, roots, and that kind of thing. So in general, we don't bother with a canopy layer. So a no-dig garden is really ideal for growing leafy greens and vegetables and such. And you can, if you after you cover your garden with a wood chip layer, it's called lasagna gardening because you have the layers. But also you can then grow woody plants in it better. So because it's actually more of a fungal environment then, because there's more carbon in the soil. You can grow wine cap mushrooms, for example, and oyster mushrooms in the wood chips. As long as they're fresh, you can inoculate them. So there's another question. Do you have any tips for transitioning from a traditional garden to a no-dig method? Yeah, I've done it. So all you need to do is stop digging. That's all there is to it. That's the short answer. Stop digging, because you're destroying the soil structure. The soil structure took hundreds, if not thousands of years to establish. Basically, all the wormholes, all of the elevator shafts that are created by taprooted plants like thistles and great mullein, also dandelions as well. Apparently, a dandelion can be 4 meters long. Of course, it'll only be hair thin once you get probably about that deep. But the soil structure is really important to keep, and that's the main reason why we do no-dig gardening. It's not the thing that attracts most people to no-dig gardening. It's actually, well, which is of course 95% less weeding to do, it's an attractive proposition. However, long-term thinking, now you want to make sure you keep that soil structure, keep the ground well drained. Unless your ground is completely compacted, you might as well just at least broad fork it. You can get a broad fork, and you'll see those in market gardens oftentimes. They are quite expensive though, I found. I haven't got one yet. Didn't really need it because our ground here is not too bad. It's not particularly compacted, but I would suggest keeping it no dig, because you have less slug pressure, you have more soil life, you have better soil structure, with that better drainage, and of course you have all the fertility on top, which means that all the runoff of the rain goes down into the soil, and it improves the soil below. So your soil is going to get deeper and deeper and deeper as worms keep coming up, eating that compost and then bringing it back down into their wormholes and then pooping it out. So it definitely makes an awful difference, especially after a few years. The existing soil layer will incorporate with your compost layer on top, and the soil life will make sure of it. Okay, so there's another question here. I often wondered about the costs of your compost and wood chip deliveries. So it's mostly transport cost. The materials are actually very cheap. So mushroom compost is kind of I wouldn't call it a waste product, but I'd call it it's spent compost that is no longer useful for growing mushrooms, because I suppose all the carbon has been pulled out of it. There'll be still some left in it, but it's probably just not at the high efficiency rate that a factory that grows mushrooms commercially would need. So it's mostly nitrogen, actually. It's chicken manure, straw, and gypsum. So that's all there is in it. and it's usually about 200 or 300 euro to get a truckload delivered. It depends on how far away you are, but if you're, let's say, if you can find the nearest mushroom farm to you, or any kind of a compost facility that produces compost, it's usually the transport that we have to worry about most here. As soon as you put a truck on the road, it's 200 or 300 euro, but that's still cheap considering you can have you can get 15 tons of compost for like as little as 200 or 300 euro, and the wood chips are about the same. Again, it takes an awful lot of wood and an awful lot of work, even with big machines, and even if you have professional machines, still a lot of work though. Like even feeding the wood chipper with an actual digger with a claw on it, and actually pushing big trees into the wood chipper, it takes some amount of trees to fill up a big silage trailer. That's what we got delivered. If you check our latest videos, I think about 10 videos ago, there was a video of the delivery, wood chip delivery coming in, and it barely fit. That's the name of the thumbnail you'll be looking for. And it didn't quite go where we wanted it to go, but the wood chips are great. It's all willow, by the way. So again, the costs can be different depending on where you are, but don't think of it like it's an upfront investment. It's a few hundred euro. What's a few hundred euro compared to the kind of food security that a big pile of compost represents? Like literally, you could spread it out over 100 square meters, or what's that, about 11,000 square feet. And it's an area about the size of a standard allotment plot, as I said earlier. And like our pizza garden, if you want to look it up, that's one compost pile, and you can see what you're able to do with just one delivery of a big silage trailer or truckload of compost. So we can grow a lot of vegetables out of one load of compost, and you'll probably be making, if you grow vegetables, if you're good at growing vegetables, I guess you can, and it's not hard to learn how to do it. You just watch some videos and just just try it. Like just give it a try. But I would advise you to start your plants in trays in a greenhouse on the table, so that the slugs aren't going to be a problem on your young plants. And if you have a no-dig garden with a healthy soil life, you can plant your plants out, and they will do much better than in conventional gardening, because they'll just take off much faster, because the compost is really loose and malleable. Yeah, did you get the compilation one? Oh yeah, you have a timeline, a link with a timestamp in it, people. Let me see here. What are the initial steps you should take to start a nursery business? Well, the first thing you gotta know is how to propagate plants. So you can look up videos on our channel if you want to. So you can start plants you got to get really good at starting plants, first of all. And you can start a nursery from very little or no money at all. It's actually pretty much the only business that you can start, one of the only businesses that you can start without a major cash injection in the beginning. So you can just get some seed trays, you can get soil blockers, and you can get some good seed starting compost. That's a must, I think. The little stuff doesn't cut it anymore. It's got too many bits and too many fibers in it, and it's not that cheap anymore. We'd rather buy the professional stuff for a tenner a bag, but you get twice as much. So it's almost the same price, and it's a pleasure to work with. So definitely, seeds are cheap. You can get 100 seeds for perennials for like €1 or €2. And you can also get cuttings from your friends or from you can get cuttings anywhere almost, but you should really get some plants, like specimen plants that you plant in your garden, and you cut those back every year to make sure that you get good wood every year, fresh wood. You want to use last year's wood for cuttings if you want to root them, if you're doing hardwood cuttings. So there's a few different types of cuttings you can grow wood from any time of year almost, except for the end of autumn. I wouldn't bother, because the cuttings might go rotten in the ground if you do that. We've got lots of videos how to start plants from cuttings. You can look it up on our website. or plant propagation. We have a course too. We run that regularly enough, like once a month or so. If you want to check out our events page, it's just gardensforlife.ie /events. So if you want to partake in one of our courses, those are in-person courses. We also have an online course of no-dig gardening, which we're going to improve in the next few weeks. And we're going to make more courses available on the internet as well. I know they're not the same as coming here in person and learning with us. But of course, not all of you live within an hour or two. So it's a big world, but it's a small country. I tell you one thing now, half the people that come here, they already know someone that we know. So it's just, that's Ireland for you. What's your recommendation on a seed starting compost? Classman from, I don't know if are you based in Ireland? I would suggest getting it from fruithillfarm.ie in Cork. Fruit Hill Farm, and it's the Classman. I think it's with 2 M's. Maybe you could look it up, Bianca. Can you look up Classman seed starting compost and drop a link into the chat? Not as a banner, please, so that people can click on it. Well, then you're not too far from there. Maybe you could even go and visit them. They're a great place. Fruit Hill Farm are great. Thank you, Bianca. That's the link. So the link is actually there now. So on the chat, you can get soil blocking compost as well. That's especially made just for starting it in blocks rather than trays. So we do both actually, because soil blocks are really handy for the air pruning that they do. So you get a better quality seedling in the end, and it takes up less space. So you can put more plants in a smaller space, at least to start them anyway, from seed. But I found they dry out much quicker than trays. But at least you won't have roots that are pot bound and circling in your pots or trays. If you have any questions at all for me about Gardens for Life, about homestead living, about our transition from consumers to producers, we're certainly not perfect, but we are, we're taking steps in the right direction, because I think not producing everything you need is the way forward, but producing some of the things that you need. At least that way you are kind of easing the burden of your own burden on the system as well. There's only one thing better than recycling, and that's upcycling. That's what I always like to say. And definitely growing your own food saves an awful lot of rubbish or plastic that you don't have to recycle. If you grow it yourself, you don't have to package it and to bring it to your house, because you're picking it fresh. And food that you grow yourself will never be, food that you buy in a supermarket will never be as good as food that you grow at home, or at least food that you buy from a local producer at a farmer's market even, because it's just not as fresh. So the food in the shops is already going to be a few days old, at least, maybe even a week or two. Who knows, with the fruits and all. And who knows what's being sprayed on it, even the organic stuff. I wouldn't trust it for a second, but we do buy a lot of food in the shops as well. We try to buy organic wherever we can, and especially whatever we can't grow. Usually we go to the shop to buy all the things that we can't grow, and they're all usually not good for you. But that said, we need to grow more food ourselves too, especially food that are long-term storable, even fresh in the gardens. If you can store food alive out there in the garden, for example, kale, that's going to be there for you in the winter if you don't harvest it, that's great. Usually it's fairly good quality depending on what type of kale you're planting. Like red Russian kale is really good, or you can grow Taunton Dean kale. That's a perennial. The leaves stay fairly good quality deep into the winter, well after Christmas. And carrots too, you can keep those in the ground until after Christmas. And not sure about parsnips, but pumpkins, definitely got to take those in before the frost, otherwise they get frost damaged. So we have our next seed and plant swap coming up on the 12th of May. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, or haven't seen the video of it, I might just play it for you, actually. Give me a second here. I'm actually on my website, on the website here. Hang on. How are you doing, Martin? For Life and Bird on Homestead. We are having another seed. Not sure if you can hear the sound of that now. What you can see here. So we're going to be you're very welcome to come along, and I just want to show you what it looks like. So yeah, we had an awful lot of people turning up, especially people that we already knew from the start, and a lot of friends and gardeners and homesteaders, and it's great because people are definitely networking, and they're finding each other as well. Anywhere you are, you can come along and just have a chat with people and do some networking as well. So we're going to be running that event again in May. So that's the 12th of May, and it's free. The entry is free. So we run a raffle as well, and people can donate seeds and plants and whatever you have, or something for the raffle as well. So yeah, the chicken was very good. I was just holding her there, and she was fairly content. So yeah, if you have any questions about the seed and plant swap, let me know as well. And we are looking for people that have any kind of skills that they think that it might be useful to other people, especially in terms of homesteading. We might even have someone that does bouquets, as well as someone that teaches how to keep bees as well. And then you can bring on your questions if you ever wanted to keep chickens as well. I might actually run a chicken workshop at the event. And anyone else that wants to host any kind of casual workshops at the event, please let me know. Send me an email to contact@gardensforlife.ie. And yeah, we can keep you a table, but you do have to book it in first. And the event entry is free again, but we do want to give people the opportunity to learn some new skills that are useful, especially in terms of homesteading, for example, and gardening too. So I see there is another question. Hello, Kevin. How are you doing? Had a problem with flea beetle attacks, mostly lettuce. How to control them? Well, I believe you live in the US. We've been lucky enough we don't have to deal with those kind of pests here. It's probably too cold here for them. I don't know how you can deter them. So you could maybe you can get them at the larva stage. You can bring in try to attract other beneficial insects that maybe eat their larva before they can hatch and eat all your lettuce. Or you maybe need to grow lettuce in a different place, like on a windowsill, for example. And I'm not even joking you, because you can use these plastic supermarket crates. They're really good for growing both strawberries, lettuce, and carrots too, especially the carrot root fly. Doesn't seem to be too interested in it. Oh yes, so yeah, you're in Galway. Yeah, no, we've never had a problem with any kind of pests in the garden, really. We just try to keep increasing biodiversity by interplanting, I should say, long-term flowering plants like insectary plants that attract beneficial insects. So especially marigolds are really good to deter wireworm in potatoes, but also it's really good to deter other insects too. I think it's maybe not that certain pests, for the lack of a better term, basically insects that just come along and multiply in mad numbers. You could try to just again plant flowers between your vegetables. Maybe they're flowers that you can use for another purpose, especially for making tinctures or for making oils and that kind of thing. like a great mullein or marigold. Or Bianca, if you have any suggestions what other plants are good, please let me know. You can grow herbs that go to flower as well, hyssop or lavender or that type of thing. Anything really like that helps bring in more insects. Like insects will be flying around and they'll see your garden and they'll see the flowers and they will come to your garden and they'll have a snack. They'll feed away at the nectar. And if you can actually get them to stay as well, if you can provide them with habitat throughout the growing season, it's not too bad. But over the winter especially, it's really important to give them somewhere to stay and hibernate for the winter. We do insect piles. We don't do compost piles at all anymore. That means it's just basically a compost pile with lots of woody material in it, and green material, a little bit of green material in it too. But we don't turn it. We just leave it, and we keep piling on top, year after year. And you can, yeah. So the insects will just have somewhere to stay. So the runoff, the rain, when it rains on the compost or on your insect pile, it'll actually run some of that fertility off the pile as well. So you don't have to actually turn your compost pile. You can benefit from just planting things around it instead. So the rain, or downhill from it, if you have a slope in your garden. So it's another way to deal with it. But in terms of, taking, I mean, the first thing I would do is you could net your lettuces as well. We don't actually grow lettuce out in the garden, but I'd grow it in a crate, somewhere more accessible, somewhere in zone 1, like somewhere where we go every day. And that way you can harvest it bit by bit. And I'd grow a type of lettuce that you can harvest one leaf at a time rather than waiting for it to grow ahead. Same as kale. Kale is vastly superior to cabbage, even though a lot of people in Ireland in particular kind of think of kale as a fodder crop for cows and sheep, which it is not. If you get more selected varieties, there is probably 100 different varieties of kale, and many of which we grow. We have grown about 8 or 9 different varieties, and we've got videos on. I think you just type in cabbage or kale. That's the name of the video, and you'll get some. But kale is way better because you can pick it one leaf at a time. You don't have to wait to mature for 6 months, and then you're going to end up with loads of pests in it. But again, if your plants are healthy, so-called pests won't attack it. Same as slugs. Maybe that's the secret. Maybe your plants are stressed. I know I'll be going on about your lettuce a lot now, but I think maybe it comes down to the fact that your lettuce may not be very healthy, and therefore its defenses are down. And plants do defend themselves with chemicals. So all plants in the world are poisonous, and plants don't have legs. They can't run away when an animal comes, or predator in their eyes, and it just basically can only defend itself using chemicals instead. So thanks, Bianca. There's a whole lot of information about it there. Now look, yarrow can be planted in between. Yeah, but just remember that yarrow is a perennial, so it's going to spread a little bit as well. It's going to make seeds, and it's going to spread by root as a little bit as well. So you may have less space next year in that garden bed. By the way, we don't have garden beds anymore. We don't do them anymore because there's no need. We just do grow spaces instead and put the paths wherever it suits us. So wherever the path ends up is where the path will be. So basically, wherever the most natural places that we walk, those paths actually establish, and then we just get a bucket of wood chips and just throw a little bit of wood chip, a layer of wood chip, just to sprinkle on top to keep our feet clean and dry for the growing season. And it's that time of year now. I better get that done out the back. Yeah, I can't believe we've been going for 50 minutes already. Does anyone else have any questions about gardening or homesteading? So tomorrow morning, we're actually doing a canning workshop, pressure canning workshop. And tomorrow evening we're doing so chicken keeping for egg production workshop, and we are running a bunch of other workshops as well. How to grow food using no dig, how to do home brewing a little bit more as well. Lots of different bits and pieces. Thank you all for joining our live chat, and yeah, we hope you're going to have a great growing season. And please remember that we have a Patreon page. If you want to support us, you can join us there. Oh, let me see here. We highly appreciate any support that you can give us. You can also buy tubers, cuttings, and plants on our online shop. It's just on our website on the main page. Click the button. It's just gardenforlife.ie/shop. And that's it. We'll see you next week. And thank you for being here. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.